Moga CD, Moga CD, shine bright, green light, Buddha of all accomplishing wisdom. Moga CD, Moga CD, Om Ah Hum. Thank you for joining me and welcome to part two of a four-part series, Verities of Being. This is Siddha. Primal reality, the pathless path, lineage of no lineage, emerging global wisdom tradition, Gaian politics, Gaian poetics, the ascendancy of the feminine, altruism and sustainability as spiritual and existential imperatives. These are the themes that my work has focused on over the last 30 years. This is a time of great trial and tribulation in my country and in our world. Life affirming, celebratory, empowering. This is the experience that I hope you take with you from this talk. Verity, verities. Something such as a statement that is true, especially a fundamental and inevitably true value. Yeah. So, CDs, CD, power, Siddha, powers. Dictionary definition, Collins American, miraculous power imparted by late stages of intense meditation. Any occult power acquired through discipline. For our purposes tonight in this talk, CD's powers. Siddha, a powerful being, a being with powers. There's a list of nine Marvels, nine CDs, and 19 CDs uh, from sources. The sources, they're sourced in the text, which will be posted with this video. Um, a few of the powers enumerated in these two lists are uh, sinister. I mean, think Hydra or Magneto. But in this presentation, we are going to delve into 8 CDs, which do not appear in either of these, or for that matter, any other list of CDs that you will come across. Indeed, they are not recognized as such. They are taken for granted in human incarnation. Number 8. So my list randomly added up to 8 CDs. Um, and interestingly, according to Keith Thaumann in his introduction to Legends of the Mahasiddhis, the great powers are enumerated differently in various traditions, sometimes as 7, sometimes as 8. I didn't know that. I had seen these 9 and 19, and I've seen others. I didn't know that it was Uh, Typically a list of seven or eight. Coincidence? Three is a holy number. Five is a holy number. Seven is a holy number. Magical numbers, potent, dynamic. Odd numbers. Of course, in a broader sense, all the so-called um, natural or whole numbers, that is 1 through 10, they are all holy. All respect to Pythagoras. But you know what I mean about 3, 5, and 7. 8 belongs with 3, 5, and 7. Not just generically holy, but extra holy, like 3, 5, and 7. There are 8 limbs of Ashtanga, the Eightfold Path of the Lord Buddha, but they're not what I'm feeling into here. I'm feeling the 8 as in the major arcana of the tarot. The strength card is the number 8 in the major arcana. And you'll see also the maiden holding open the jaws of the lion. You'll see there's a sideways 8 over her head, the sign of infinity. Typically, you'll be told that there are two other places in the deck uh, where the infinity symbol appears. One is the magician card, and one is I think it's the two of pentacles. But actually, there are four cards in the weight deck in which the infinity sign appears. Um, the fourth one is the world. The world. If you look at it, you'll see the goddess, and you'll see a infinity sign in the form of a furled, not unfurled, a furled banner above her crown. And you'll see an infinity sign in the shape, in the form of a banner, an unfurled banner below her feet. Kether and Malkuth, primal reality, infinite power. One thing I'll note here, it's the first card, by the way. That's the strength card. The 8 is the first card I ever drew from the tarot. And this example of the strength card is from the weight deck. There are many marvelous decks now. And you can go all the way back to Dolly's deck and Aleister Crowley, old man Aleister Crowley's deck. Many marvelous decks in the last 10, 20 years. But you should know that although Arthur Edward Waits held the copyright and is listed as the author, Pamela Coleman Smith, Pamela Coleman Smith was the artist who illustrated the entire deck. She was not acknowledged for her formidable creative accomplishment. So, Pamela Coleman Smith, may her name. Before we move into my litany of 8 CDs, not recognized as such, I want to draw your attention and I want to invoke the presence of the Mahasiddhis, the great ones with power. And there's a marvelous book, Keith Dowman's Legend of the Mahasiddhis, in several different versions, all beautifully illustrated. There are 84 great ones, uh, lives, tales of their lives told in Legends of the Mahasiddhis. Of the 84, 4 are women. I assure you, there are many, 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 many more women Siddhis down through the ages, but history is written by the winners, and for the last millennia or so, the winners were their archivists were male monks to a great extent. So we've got 4. Uh, I remember when I remember when uh, I was reading into a lot of different traditions. This isn't right. But if you look sideways and you turn things upside down, you find all the women sages and saints. You see them. They're just not, the information isn't organized in a way that makes it easily accessible to you. But they're there, named and unnamed. Anyway, one of these four, I'm going to tell the story briefly, very abbreviated version of the powerful story of this particular Mahasiddhi from Dowman's translation. And I've, as I said, I've condensed it down. I've told this story before. You should go and read it in that uh, marvelous book itself. Lakshmankara, also known as the Crazy Princess. In the Dakini realm of Odiana is where I know that my American English is mangling the beauty of Sanskrit and Pali and Tibetan. I acknowledge that. But in the land of Odiana, on the pistil of a lotus blossom, the marvelous one who has achieved the supreme accomplishment, renowned as lotus born, traveling in the company of many Dakinis, I will follow you in this path of liberation. That's 7 line prayer. Padmasambhava, prayer to Padmasambhava, the Vajra Guru. He came, he went to Tibet from Kashmir. He came from Kashmir, Odiana, in Kashmir. So did Lakshman Kara. In the Dakini realm of Odiana, one king decided to wed his sister to another king to forge an alliance. Uh, the girl was 7 years old. Lakshmi was an extraordinary being. From birth. She had been blessed with all the qualities of the light. Think of Mozart, coming in and as a child being able to play profound compositions. Lakshman was that way in terms of the the tantras and many great texts and teachings that she had been exposed to by the gurus in the circle, her circle. Her family managed to postpone the consummation of the marriage until she was 16. And but then that day came, she was 16. Uh, she accepted her fate, her responsibility. They loaded up huge dowry and offerings, and she led a procession to the gates of the neighboring kingdom where she was to become the wife, the princess, the wife of this prince, the son of the king, who was forging alliance with her brother's kingdom. She waited. She waited outside of the palace of her husband to be. There was a great clamor of horses and baying dogs and horse hooves. And then a royal hunting party came galloping past, obviously returning from the chase. And at the head of the group rode a stern-faced man in gorgeous clothes soiled by the bloody carcass of a slain doe he had flung over his saddle. Her hair, Lakshman Kara's hair stood on end, and blood drained from her face when she learned that the prince she had seen was her husband. She had all the chests and boxes and bales she had brought with her opened on the spot. She began to give away her entire dowry, everything, even the jewelry she wore. She locked herself in the chamber her husband had provided, tore the clothes from her body, smeared herself with oil and lampblack, unbound her hair, covered it with filth until she looked like a wild woman. She greeted the physicians with hysterical screams, hurling oil lamps and hairbrushes and attacking them with her teeth and fingernails. To all appearances, Lakshman Kara was hopelessly insane. One night, when the guards at her door had slipped away uh, to attend to something, Lakshman Kara slipped away. She crept out of her room, down the stairs, and through the labyrinthian palace, found her way to the kitchen, hid amidst the garbage and the trash, and escaped through the back gates when the sweepers came to collect the refuse. She made her way to a cremation ground and renouncing the world to become a yogini. She lived by scavenging food thrown out to feed the dogs. For 7 years, holy, holy number, 7 years, she lived in this manner and continually deepening her experience of the essential nirvana. A sweeper of the king's latrine, an untouchable, found her and served her faithfully during this time. And when she gained her realization, she gave this sweeper of the latrines initiation, and he quickly attained Buddhahood without anyone knowing of his achievement except for Lakshman Kara. Now, the father of her former fiance went out, now it's past 7 years now. We're way past 7 years now. He went out on a royal hunt. He got lost. He was exhausted. He fell asleep. He awoke at night. His attention was caught by something in the distance. It seemed to be a light. It was emanating from the mouth of a cave. There, a wondrous sight met his eyes. Seated upon a jeweled throne was Lakshman Kara, her body glowing with the golden radiance that suffused the whole cave with light. She was surrounded by a circle of adoring goddesses. He remained there all night watching the events in the magical cave. Goddesses, meaning beings from other dimensions, had come to be present with her. Next day, he returned to the palace, telling no one what he saw, but he could not keep himself from returning to the cave. Finally, one night, he entered the cave, prostrated himself before the yogini. He begged so humbly for instruction. Lakshman Kara said, "You cannot be my disciple. Your guru is one of your very own latrine sweepers. He is one of my disciples who has attained Siddhi." "I have many sweepers," said the king. "How shall I know him?" "Put your trust in the man who feeds the poor after he has finished his work. Go to him at night for instruction." Wasn't long before the king discovered the identity of the sweeper guru. He led the untouchable to his throne and seated the untouchable on his throne and prostrated himself before the guru and requested instruction, which he received. Thereafter, Lakshman Kara and the sweeper performed many miracles in that kingdom before they both ascended to the paradise of the Dakinis. Deep down in legends of the Mahasiddhas. So Walt Whitman wrote Leaves of Grass. And in one of the poems in Leaves of Grass is I Sing the Body Electric. And so this is just a bit more groundwork before we get into the 8 CDs. In Leaves of Grass, Whitman declares, I sing the body electric. And he asks rhetorically, If the body were not the soul, what is the soul? And if the body were not the soul, what is the soul? Whitman knew. In his own way, Whitman knew. Early in the Civil War, Whitman moved from Brooklyn to Washington, D.C., and served as a volunteer nurse in the Union's military hospitals. Although they never formally met and remained strangers, Whitman often encountered Abraham Lincoln as POTUS riding through the streets of the Capitol, horseback. They would acknowledge each other with a nod and a bow. On our Born to Die album, released in 2012, the great Lana Del Rey offered a sorcerous spell, a siren song woven around the first line of that Whitman poem, I Sing the Body Electric. I sing the body electric, baby, Lana. And I just felt strongly to include the energies of Whitman and Lana Del Rey in this presentation. Human incarnation is this, by the way, the images here, those pages, those are the actual first edition pages uh, from Leaves of Grass. I Sing the Body Electric, and then the other screenshots are from Lana Del Rey in concert singing I Sing the Body Electric. Human incarnation is a temple within which our primal reality dwells. It is the temple and it dwells within the temple. It is both. They are one. Let's briefly highlight some of the elements of the temple's architecture. Five bodies, soma, vagus nerve. So five bodies, I've written and spoken at length about the five bodies. I'm not going into all of that here, except to say it's important to get out of the trance of imagining yourself a mind and a heart and a body, or a soul and a body, or a mind and a soul and a body. This trance, this is literally the trance of samsara. It is ignorance. You have five bodies. You can call them sheaths or veils, koshas. You can say there are seven instead of five. Seven bodies is the version that's laid out in in theosophical teachings. There isn't really a difference. It's splitting hairs. They are not mutually exclusive. They don't contradict each other, the five bodies and the seven bodies. The seven body version is more granular. I default to the five body version. Uh, Physical body, and Anamaya Kosha, energetic body, Manomaya Kosha, psychological body, intuitive body, bliss body, Ananda Maya Kosha, intuitive body, Vijnana Maya Kosha. So I say psychological body, by the way, because, yeah, typically you read it translated as mental body. For me, that's too limited. It doesn't really contain enough information uh, because it's the mental and emotional body. So that's why I say psychological bodies. I could go on and on about the five bodies. It's an important shift in perspective. Find more about it in Words of Power. You can look it up in Words of table of contents for Words of Power. But to experience yourself as five bodies, these five sheaths, which occupy all of it occupies the same space. It's not like a Russian dolls. It's not one inside the other. They all occupy the same space. But when you come to a point where you no longer say your body, you say my bodies. You have shifted something. It's an important shift in perspective. And much of what we're talking about in this series of four talks is a shift, or shifts in perspective, right? Soma is a word that's used in different ways uh, now, um, but I'm talking about soma in the context of somatics, and particularly somatic psychotherapy. It's an in ancient Greek, soma meant body, physical body. Today, understanding embodiment, understanding trauma, we understand soma to mean the whole space, not just the physical body and the energetic body, but how the psychological body, emotional and mental, are, how all three are interwoven. The physical body, the psychological body, and the energetic body. It no longer makes any sense to simply talk about psyche. I could go on, uh, but for here and now, I'll just say this. You know, in somatic psychotherapy, for example, if we discover how trauma, literally discover, my experience, you literally discover how trauma and grief are held in the physical and energetic bodies. Not just what's going on in your mind. How did you feel about that? I, I mean, actually, how trauma and grief are held in the body. Where in the body are they held? And how to release them. So I'll just say that just as after Einstein, it no longer made any sense to simply talk about time and space. It makes much more sense to talk about space-time. Similarly, the more we know about real embodiment, and I say real embodiment instead of full embodiment because real embodiment, it is a moving target, if you will. It's a never-ending process. So I say real embodiment. It no longer makes any sense to simply talk about psyche. It makes much more sense to talk about psyche hyphen soma, space hyphen time, psyche hyphen soma. Again, a shift in perspectives that really, really moves the needle. And then there's the vagus nerve. It's not the longest nerve in the body. That's, I think, the sciatic nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve, the longest and most complex nerve that originates in the brain. Vagus, derived from Latin, to wander. So the vagus nerve wanders through the upper body, innervating vital organs along the way and ends in the abdomen. Hearts, lungs, digestive tract, liver, all along the way. The vagus nerve is central to the parasympathetic nervous system. It's primary nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. Studies show that the vagus nerve helps you deal with PTSD because you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And so you're moving from, if you're a trauma victim, an abuse victim, a survivor, trauma survivor, abuse survivor, as I am, uh, you're moving from fight or flight to rest and digest. You literally come to a point in your journey where you realize that there is something other than fight or flight. There is a whole nother system, parasympathetic nervous system. Studies show the vagus nerve helps you deal with PTSD. Uh, but for now, here now, belly breathing, please. Breathe deep into your belly, fill your belly up with breath. Exhale with the jaw dropped. filling up the belly and emptying out the belly with breath, slowly, gently, a few times. And yes, singing, whispering, breathing who or ah into your heart center, right? Ooh, ooh, ah. And legs up the wall, legs up the wall, simply legs up the wall. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. As often as these practices suggest themselves to you, you will be interacting with that vagus nerve and honoring its work and facilitating its work. Yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi. Yes. Okay. First of the 8 unacknowledged CDs. Touch is the first of the 8 inborn plug and play hardwired CDs we will be celebrating in this talk. It is, as all 8 are, an integral aspect of our primal reality. The skin is, after all, the largest organ in the human body, even though generally it's not even seen as an organ. And yet, the power of touch and the desperate need for it expand human life from birth to death. I've referenced Ashley Montagu's Touching the Human Significance of Skin and Talks in writings over the years. It's a very important book. 512 pages, first published in 1971. I read it back then. I didn't know what I was reading, but I knew it was important and I kept it with me. And I revisited it in the process of my healing journey. A few 100,000 copies have been sold. Here's some quotes. Sensory system. As a sensory system, the skin is much more important organ, is the most important organ of the body. The loving touch, like music, often utters things that cannot be spoken. The raw sensation of touch as stimulus is vitally necessary for the physical survival of the organism. No reason reading from touch and now moving to uh, words of power. These hands, these hands are from a cave, UNESCO World Heritage Site in Santa Cruz Province, Argentina. These hands, thousands and thousands of years old. These hands are found in caves, thousands and tens of thousands of year old caves, all across the planet, literally. South America, Europe, Australia, Indonesia. And I first saw hands very similar to these in Australia, and it changed my life. So I'm going to read just this brief passage from Words of Power um, to Montague invokes the great Helen Keller to make the point that you can be deaf and blind and still live an extraordinary life. But you can't live at all without your skin. Furthermore, the way that Helen Keller broke through her isolation to create an extraordinary life for herself was through her skin and by the power of touch. And what was it that the Aboriginals drew in those caves in Australia tens of thousands of years ago? Human hands, Consider the 50,000-year-old Abo cave paintings in New South Wales. These hands have touched me. For 50,000 years, they have been open. For 50,000 years, they have been asking. For 50,000 years, welcoming. For 50,000 years, reaching out to feel through to the throbbing life of the universe. Not clenched, open. Not holding a weapon, not holding a tool. Open hands, reaching, touch. They are as imminent and as relevant and as full of technical information as the Shiva Sutras or the Bhakti Sutras of Narada or any text in any tradition from any era. It has all been there since before the beginning, really. Yes, the power of touch is an aspect of the primal reality. Laughter is the second of the eight inborn, plug and play, hardwired CDs we are celebrating in this talk. As all eight are, it is an integral aspect of our primal reality. Where does laughter come from? Seriously, where does laughter come from? The liberating power of laughter reverberates down through the centuries. From Hotai, the laughing Buddha, uh, to Shakespeare's brave, brilliant fools, to the Mullah Nasruddin seated backwards on his donkey riding through Konya, to the stand-up comedy of Nikki Glazer, Sarah Silverman, or Wanda Sykes. Laughter frees us from twisted human predicaments and warped predilections. Laughter is sometimes irrepressible. It doesn't even need a reason, it just arises. Where does it come from? The writing uh, uh, from an article on divine grace of laughter from Psychology Today, and there'll be links and citations for all these again in the full text that'll come out with the video. Uh, so Psychology Today. Research shows that laughter ignites mental states similar to meditation, where the gamma brain waves are oscillating and the entire brain is engaged, similar to being in the flow. When we laugh with others, we connect more deeply and build more positive relationships. Laughing also releases endorphins, feel good hormones that help reduce pain. When we laugh, we get a nice shot of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that improves our mood, and attention, and serotonin, which enhances our connection with others and stabilizes our mood. The influx This influx of neurotransmitters can help us shift the mind out of fear and separateness and shape neural connections for greater love. Scientific American 2019, The Science of Why We Laugh. Wilson and Jarvis applied the concept of group selection to two different types of human laughter. This is important. Spontaneous, emotional, impulsive, involuntary laughter, that's what we're talking about, is a genuine expression of amusement and joy and is a reaction to playing and joking around. It shows up in the smiles of a child during roughhousing, for example, play. This display of amusement is called Duchamp laughter. Duchamp laughter. After the scholar, after the scholar who initiated this this line of research. Conversely, non-Duchenne laughter is studied and not very emotional. It's studied, and not very emotional. It's more of a It's kind of employed as a voluntary social strategy. Spontaneous laughter has its roots in the games of early primates. Controlled laughter may have evolved later with the development of casual conversation, denigration, and derision in social interactions. One last study here, the Indiana University 2025. Great apes, including bonobos, chimpanzees, and orangutans, all produce vocalizations resembling human laughter during play. Previous research using acoustic analysis suggests these vocalizations all share an evolutionary origin with human laughter. In other words, human laughter likely evolved from a sound made during play in a common ancestor of all the great apes. So, what is laughter? Laughter is of the nature of primal reality. It is an integral aspect of the nature of our primal reality, an integral element. And Lamont, writer, so writer, excellent writer, progressive uh, Christian, so excellent writer, progressive Christian, so a real Christian, says it best. Laughter is carbonated holiness. Laughter is carbonated holiness. So sleep is the third of these eight inborn plug and play hardwired CDs we are celebrating in this talk. And it is, as all eight are, an integral element of our primal reality. Consider these provocative insights from Ramana. Whether this estimable state of Turiya is described either as the fourth state or the one true state of consciousness, is described either as excellent sleep totally devoid of waking or as the unique unceasing waking that has nothing to do with forgetful sleep. You should know that both descriptions are entirely appropriate. I've talked, and the other sleep is not ignorance, it is one's pure state. Wakefulness is not knowledge, it is ignorance. There is full awareness in sleep and total awareness in ignorance. So I've talked a lot about dream and sleep uh, in Words of Power and the talks and books that led up to Words of Power. I will read a few excerpts here on dreaming and deep sleep. We put our head on the pillow. If we're fortunate and we close our eyes, uh, and something happens. We enter a different state of consciousness in which we dream. And dreaming sometimes is gobbledygook. Other times you have dreams that have information. They carry information. You have dreams. If you write some strange dream down, you might surprise yourself that a dream that had made no sense at all a few months earlier, maybe a year or two later, maybe a decade later, turns out to be a precognitive dream. Or sometimes you have a dream that's just clearly precognizant. You recognize it as such, and indeed it is. And so, where does this information come from? Where does the information in a precognitive dream come from? That question alone opens up a lot. But we won't stop there. There are other kinds of dreams are like koans. We work on them all our lives. They're mystical dreams, shamanic dreams. They have meaning to us, and such dreams may have multiple meanings through the one dream can have multifacets. It means one thing at one time in life means another in another time in life. They don't cancel each other out. It's just multifaceted. It's a koan. You'll find there are different facets. Then there are other kinds of themes that are just working out our psychological problems in daily life. We have dreams where we work out our problems and face things we're too afraid to look at in our waking mind or too depressed to look at in our waking minds. Consciousness brings them out in the dream state, and we kind of unpack them, dismantle them, put them back together, take a look at them in the process. Where is this going on? Who are you really, and what are you really? What is consciousness? What is really the waking state? People would come to Ramana pursuing the ultimate truth, and because it was clear from his atmosphere that he had it, they came to him and they wanted to know. And one of the things that struck me in reading over his dialogues was when somebody would come and say something like some question about sleep and dreams, and or some question about samadhi, and he would say, how would you describe the state of deep sleep? And the person in dialogue with him would typically describe that state as a numbness, a deadness, a complete unawareness, a blankness. And Ramana would point out that the deep sleep state, which all of us go into, I want to say every night, but most nights, otherwise we go crazy. That deep sleep state is the closest to nirvana without being nirvana itself. In fact, it is the nature of deep sleep and uh, samadhi. They're really the same. The only difference is that samadhi, sahaja samadhi, samadhi with open eyes, nirvikalpa samadhi is a trance state of samadhi, but there is a consciousness in both. There is for lack of a better word, a kind of waking state within the samadhi. In both of those uh, states, in the state of deep sleep, there is not that waking. The dream processing has shut down, and you're just in the deep sleep state. You come out the other side, and you know you slept well, but you don't know what happened. So the point of this is, and I'll just save time by not finishing the excerpt I was going to read. The point of this is that every night, every human being goes to sleep, moves through the dream state in which all of this incredible processing of events that have happened, long undigested, unprocessed events, current unprocessed, undigested events, and things yet to come, precognitive. All this amazing dream factory is doing all of this work in the three times and on our unconscious, consciously working within our unconscious to produce these dreams which inform us about what's going on in the depths of our psyche and soma, psyche, soma, right? So, and then we pass from the dream state into the deep sleep state, which is literally samadhi, literally the equivalent of samadhi. Every night, every human being goes to sleep and enters for however long, usually not long enough, usually not 8 hours, usually not 7 hours, but for some fraction of that time, we're in a state comparable to samadhi. And that same person will wake up, every person on the planet. And that same, unless they have a disorder, which will either be dealt with or they'll be dead, right? So so a person can wake up from that state and go and sit in a conference or sit at tea with a friend or whatever and say, oh, I can't meditate. every night. You go into a state where people spend their whole lives, spend decades of their lives in seated meditation, trying to achieve a state that they achieve every night. There's just that one turn of being conscious in the samadhi. But it's a very important shift to understand that samadhi is not some abstract thing that has nothing to do or will have nothing to do with you unless it's at the end of decades of practice or whatever, which, true and not true. But the point is that it's with you every night. You couldn't live without it. You cannot live and be sane without the state of deep sleep for a few hours every 24-hour cycle. Hmm? It's seedy sleep, this dreaming and deep sleep. Oh, seedy. This image and the one in the prior slide, these are paintings of remarkable painter Tamara de Lempicka, Russian. Um, and her life story is amazing. And I have felt in this talk to go into some of these sidebars. So you might you might know she was one of the most heralded artists of the Art Deco period, the Art Deco movement. You may remember a picture of her in a green Bugatti at the wheel of a green Bugatti racing car. It's a very famous painting. In 1917, her husband was accused of being a Tsarist agent and arrested by the Cheka, and she offered herself to the Swedish council, and the Swedish council secured his release. And they fled to Paris, where they sold the family's jewels to survive. And then in 1928, they divorced. In the same year, an Austro-Hungarian baron, an art collector, commissioned Tamara to do a portrait of his mistress, a Spanish dancer. In the 1930s, she had, by then she had achieved renown in the art world. Her paintings hung alongside the work of O'Keeffe and de Kooning and others, right? Tamara and the Baron married in 1934, a year after his wife's death. And at the beginning of World War II, Tamara and the Baron fled to America. Openly bisexual, her liaisons with both men and women were made for scandal at the time. Desire and seduction were powerful themes in her work. Even earlier, while still in the Paris of the 1920s, she had been intimately aligned with lesbian and bisexual writers and artists such as Vita Sackville West and Colette. Madonna is an admirer and collector of Lempicka's work. And you'll see actually the painter's work in the music videos for Express Yourself and Vogue and Blonde Ambition and other work. It's important to understand the context of people. It adds richness and poignancy to understand the complexity and the trials and tribulations of people's lives, especially what came of artists and creatives in the time of the Great World War II and the fight against fascism. So I think I'm going to take a couple of these little sidebars along the way. The eighth, no, the fourth of the 8 inborn plug and play hardwired CDs that are celebrated in this talk is conscience. So, def, dictionary definition, Oxford language, inner feeling or voice viewed as acting as a guide to the righteousness or wrongness, the rightness or wrongness of one's behavior. I love this quote from Kierkegaard. I always uh, feel Kierkegaard to be Nietzsche's brilliant, kinder younger brother. I love both of their work influenced me in my early life. But I love this quote: the relationship between the individual and God, the God relationship is the conscience. The, the relationship between the individual and God, the God relationship is the conscience. And I have here another credible source on the nature of conscience, George Washington. Labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire, conscience. Labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire called conscience. George Washington. Just as we drew a distinction between two kinds of humor in our exploration of laughter, the laughter CD, here we need to draw a distinction between two kinds of conscience. That is conscience with a capital C, I'll call it, versus lowercase c consciousness. In the context of what Kierkegaard called the God relationship and George Washington called celestial fire, we are, of course, talking about capital C consciousness. But meanwhile, for millennia, lowercase c conscience model predicated on patriarchal values has been superimposed over this portal into our primal reality. In this era of the great shift, we are breaking through that rigid, skewed frame to reestablish a main line to that celestial fire, a main line to that God relationship that is capital C conscience. A great author, Margaret Atwood, author of Handmaid's Tale, many other wonderful works. She explores this in The Year of the Flood, a dystopian novel set in post-apocalyptic world. Atwood writes, hunger is a powerful reorganizer of conscience. Hunger is a powerful reorganizer of the conscience. Indeed, hunger opens your eyes. Hunger introduces you to desperation. Hunger reorders everything. What is right, what is wrong, what is unthinkable, everything. And yes, as we hurtle deeper and deeper into the planetary climate emergency and the sixth great extinction, well, dot, dot, dot. In a charming essay, Margaret Atwood voicing transition in the conscience of women, an Indian psychotherapist and Bollywood movie star, Nihai Dubey, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it, she wrote, women need to be in full control of their existence to reshape and rewrite by rewriting culture. A concept personally, perhaps this is the reason Atwood presents such an openly oppressive culture, endorsing subtly patriarchal mindset, hoping that it might be refuted by both protagonist and readers. She emphasizes that a woman should assert her true self, disregarding what others think of her, a self that is not even in the slightest possible way overshadowed by men, a self that is not even in the slightest way overshadowed by men. Thus, skillfully depicting in her novel myriad shades of women alive, wanting, asserting, through these enigmatic female protagonists, Atwood has voiced not only the transition that has occurred in women's conscience over this past century, from wanting to fit into the stereotype images of a good woman, a good wife, to women who are becoming more and more aware of their own inner self and their own wants and not afraid to express themselves. The new woman, she calls it. So you can see that struggle to reorganize conscience. And she was talking about three other novels in this paper, this charming paper. But you can see it play out in Handmaid's Tale as the characters come to grips with what is behind the mores, societal mores superimposed over the conscience, what the real innate primal reality conscience, the big C conscience, the celestial fire conscience, the God relationship conscience, what it is really tell them about what is right and wrong, about the societal norms that they are expected to accept in a patriarchal, oligarchical, misogynist, racist society. It's a lot of it. And it might seem like a tangent, but it isn't. The conscience with a capital C is feminist, green, and woke. Green, woke, and feminist. The, that is conscience. It is accessible to you directly, immediately. You know this, you feel this. And as we come to grips, as we struggle to come to grips individually and collectively with the planetary climate emergency and the sixth great extinction and all that flows from those scientific facts, and as we struggle with facilitate and open up and accelerate the ascendancy of women, to break down what's happened with the patriarchy over all these, whatever it was in the beginning, what it has devolved to now. These two things, dealing with our nature, our relationship with nature, with Gaia, and the ascendancy of the feminine. This consciousness with a capital C, those impulses are coming from that conscience with a capital C, coming from that celestial fire, coming from that great God relationship. And I submit to you that this capital C conscience has been with us since the caves, just like the power of touch has been with us since the cave, just as the power of laughter has been with us from the caves. This capital C consciousness, this celestial fire has been with us since the caves. It is civilization. This is civilization. These inborn plug and play, hardwired CDs, they are civilization. And then it moves on from there and it evolves into all kinds of things. And our genius creates new challenges and new morality plays for us to come to grips with and learn from and survive or not survive, perish. Okay. Fifth of the eight inborn plug and play hardwired CDs that we are celebrating in this talk, an integral element of the primal reality itself. What is the recitation of mantra really? What is japa really? A workout for building mystical muscle? The process for polishing inner gemstones? A spell to remove obstacles or attract desirables? A vehicle for traveling from point X to point Y on one's spiritual journey? A worshipful offering to a god or a goddess projection? Now, without rejecting or demeaning any of these intended purposes, let me offer another view, a different perspective, one which doesn't supplant any of them, but can occupy the same space. I say to you, your voice doesn't serve the mantra serves your voice. I say, just as your voice utters sacred symbols, those sacred symbols are uttering your voice. You may imagine your voice to be a chalice from which the mantra is poured. I suggest, just as your voice, uh, I suggest to you that the mantra is the chalice into which your voice is poured. You may imagine your voice to be a chalice from which the mantra is poured. I suggest to you the mantra is a chalice into which your voice is poured. And remember, I say your voice is literally an aspect, an element of your very being, your primal reality itself. Now, there are two tone-based, voice-based techniques in the Vijnana Bharava, that great tantric text. Number 15, I intone a sound, AUM, slowly. As sound enters soulfulness, so do you. And 66, silently intone a word ending in ah, and then the H effortlessly, the spontaneity. Techniques 15 and 66. There are others, but I just want to focus on these. So together, let's do a version of 15th. This is how we am. Relax yourself, shake yourself loose, sit comfortably, take a few breaths. Breath into the lungs, breath into the heart, breath into the belly, whatever feels right, accessible at that in the moment. Place the index finger and the middle finger of either hand, your choice, no superstition, on the heart center, just the fingertips, lightly. Inhale deeply but gently. Inhale. And on the exhale, sing just to clear the way. Take another breath. Ooh. To where we start. Go back to that ah. 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 And fingertips to the throat center. Ooh. 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 Now, palm of the hand over the crown, back of your skull. And this sound we're going to project up into, starts in the throat, project up instead of down, we're projecting up into the crown like this. Take a breath. Now all together, AUM. Uh, it's Om feels to me. Those are three beautiful Oms. Balinese at the top, Indian in the middle, Tibetan at the bottom. Creativity, art, music, dance, film, theater, poetry, fiction, sculpture, photography, mysteries of mysterious origin, all. Creativity simply arises in us as individuals, and frankly, quite often it rises in defiance of some tangents or some trajectory of a particular culture or civilization. It arises always, everywhere, one way or another. It is in everything and everyone. If you allow yourself to see it, feel it, hear it, even in those who don't paint or write or perform or act or direct, many who don't or think they couldn't or shouldn't really could if they were given an authentic chance to explore what is inside themselves, given an authentic chance to put words or colors or movement to their hidden griefs or passions. But even going to work every day, doing your best, raising families, launching enterprises, the creative imagination is alive. Play and creativity arise from that same mysterious source. Both are integral elements of the primal reality. Curation is a kind of creativity. Making a Spotify playlist is a creative act. Choosing art posters of photographs for the walls of your room is a creative act. The curation of films and TV series for your watch list on some content platform is a creative act. Creativity is the sixth of the eight inborn plug and play hardwired CDs that are celebrated in this talk. It is, as all eight are, an integral element of our primal reality. And yes, there is even a fascinating creativity based technique in the Vijnana Bhairava. Number 30, feel the fine qualities of creativity permeating your breast and assuming delicate configurations. Feel the fine qualities of creativity permeating your breasts and assuming delicate configurations. Number 30. I was feeling very much the presence of Valis Coltrane, feeling it strongly while pondering creativity for this talk. And I'll go first. I just these two slides were switched, but it really it really doesn't matter. It's the same. It flows the same way. Uh, the photo on the left is of the great surrealist Remedios Varo at work in her studio in 1958. The image on the right is the painting she was working on in that photo, Farewell. completed in 1958. In Words of Power, I included Varro along with Leonore Finney, Blavatsky, Carrington, Hilligard, Tanning, Dorothea Tanning, Teresa Vavila, Claudel, Camille Claudel, Amaji, Francis Woodman, Kahlo, of course, and several others for a gallery of female leaders in art and mysticism throughout centuries. Ramirez Varro was a Spanish surrealist and anarchist. She fled to Paris during the Spanish Civil War. Then she fled to Paris when the Germans swept in. Varro traveled on to Mexico City, where she met Kahlo and Rivera and became close friends with Leonora Carrington, who was also part of this, was also in Words of Power. Varro was influenced by mystical teachings of Gurdjieff, Uspensky, Blavatsky, Dr. Carl Jung, and the Sufis. In a retrospective at the Art Institute of Chicago, 20 spellbinding, that was 2023, I think. 20 of her spellbinding paintings were exhibited, paintings she did in Mexico. Featured in the center of the exhibition, preparatory sketches, the artist's notebooks, paintbrushes, crystals, which Varro charged under the moon to channel energies and unlock deepened state of awareness, a trove of other ephemera that gives us a glimpse into her creative process. These wildly imaginative and gripping works, many of which are thought to be symbolic self-portraits, reveal the artist's deep interest in tarot, alchemy, and astrology. Varro died from a heart attack at the height of her powers. She was 54 years old. André Breton, the author of the Surrealist Manifesto, said it best when he described Varro as the sorceress who left too soon. Oops. So, oh, Alice, as I was saying, she came to me strongly while I was pondering creativity for this talk. So I went looking for relevant utterances from Alice about creativity. And I myself laughing because it was such a rich vein to sort through. But here are four of them that I found very powerful. Music is powerful. Love is powerful. Poetry is powerful. Art is powerful. Be powerful. Art is a bridge that connects us to the universal consciousness. Alice Coltrane. Yes, well, simple. Vijnana Bharava has several, three, four, five, maybe five techniques related to human sexuality. I posted three of them here. And this is a marvelous statue that I saw in the Louvre of Astarte, Aphrodite, 2nd century BC. I wrote about this statue in Eye of the Dragon. Sexuality, seventh of the 8 inborn plug and play hardwired CDs that we are celebrating in this talk. An element of our primal reality. Sexuality is meant to be a sanctuary for the adventure of self-discovery, the expression of love, the deepening of intimacy, and a wellspring of pleasure. Sexuality runs, flows, moves through the depths of both dark and light realms within us. It is a great power, but it is also a dangerous one because it is so very, in part, because it is so very vulnerable. Abuse, exploitation, betrayal, all pathologies, all stalk this great power and rob it of its destiny, rob it of its promise, rob it of its full potential. This is the great This is another photo of Astarte. This one also in the Louvre. Really powerful image. And the person there is Audre Lorde. And I mentioned her also in part one in Shadow. I quoted her and I quote her here again. And she is the self-proclaimed Black lesbian mother, warrior, poet. I always say that when I invoke her because that is the way she wanted to be invoked. So here are some wonderful insights from her on the nature of Eros, from Uses of Eros, which is a marvelous, very thin text, which is included in Sister Outsider essays and speeches. Sister Outsider essays and speeches contains uses of the erotic, which is just, a few pages long, but very important. Uh, Here you see the very word eros comes from the Greek word. Very word erotic comes from the Greek word eros, the personification of love in all its aspects, born of chaos, and then personifying creative power and harmony. When I speak of the erotic, I speak of it as an assertion of the life force of women and of the great creative energy empowered, the knowledge and use of which we are now reclaiming in our language, our history, our dancing, our loving, our work. Erotic offers a well of replenishing and provocative force for the woman who does nothing and civilization. Last two, human sexuality and free will, the last two of these eight inborn plug and play hardwired. These are perhaps the most complex and challenging to frame. But well, so about this is, by the way, this painting, Dorothy Tennant's, she calls herself a spiritual. You see her there, costume, at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast wilderness. Self-portrait. So I thought it was a perfect way to epitomize the challenge of free will. Dorothy Tanning, um, like Remedios Varo, Tanning is one of the women I chose for that gallery of female leaders in art and mysticism down through the centuries that I included in Words of Power. Right, self-taught painter, printmaker, sculptor, writer, poet, born and raised in Illinois. She moved from Chicago to New York, worked as a commercial artist. Macy's art director introduced her to a gallery owner, and he exhibited her paintings. Max Ernst took an interest in her, although he was still married to Guggenheim at the time. Tanning and Ernst fell in love, moved to Sedona, and flourished there. Now, what do we notice about the Lembeca led first the Bolsheviks and then the communists and then the fascists. Uh, Varro fled the fascists, and well, there's no fleeing, no fleeing Europe, no fleeing the fascists, but Tanning and Ernst had to flee the McCarthy era and from the United States, and so in the 50s, and so they fled to France uh, after the defeat of fascism in the World War. Uh, so Tanning moved back to the U.S. after Ernst's death, and then to Mexico and then New York City, where she died at the age of 101. She said, famously, art has always been a raft onto which we climb to save our sanity. Dorothea Tanning. I don't see a different purpose for it now. Art has always been the raft onto which we climb to save our sanity. I don't see a different purpose for it now. Free will, the will to power, Nietzsche, the path of individuation. It is primal force within us, but it is also unique to each person, its expression, its direction. To reflect on the mystery of all of this, I have chosen, they're all this, there's this endless debate about free will, whether it's free will versus determinism. That's this philosophical debate. It's such a trap. Because first of all, it's not, it's a false binary because it's not either or. It's not free will or determinism because you have to also factor in randomness. Determinism implies one thing, but it's also randomness. So if anything, it's free will, determination, randomness. It's not an either or. But it always reminds me of when Ramana, people would consider Ramana Maharshi, and they would say, well, is reincarnation real? Excuse me. And Ramana would smile and he would say very patiently, go and find out who you are. Vichara, ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? Until the real answer comes, not an mental answer, the real answer comes, and you know who and what you are. And when you arrive at that state, when you know who and what you really are, and the depth of your being in your primal reality, then come back to me. And if you still have the same question about reincarnation, we'll discuss it. Knowing, of course, that when you get there, you don't really have that question anymore. You may entertain it as a topic of discussion, but it's very different than before you have that understanding of who and what you really are, your primal reality, even the touch of it. So I feel the same way about free will and determinism. If you come to a place where you understand you're beginning to understand the primal reality, that debate about in a real way, in an embodied way, uh, um, in a real way, an authentic way. You that free will and determinism argument. That's there is determinism, there is free will, there is randomness. Well, so what's new? Um, to kind of reflect the mystery of all this, I chose four brief answers from four diverse sources, all speaking from the depth of will, the depth of their own will, their own free, very free will, in their own singular voice. So either the voice of free will speaking from within the conundrum of determinism and randomness. Albert Camus. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become absolutely free, so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is itself an act of rebellion. Camus. This is Clarissa Pinkola Estes. The doors to the world of the wild self are free but precious. If you have a deep scar, that is your door. If you have an old, old story, that is your door. If you love the sky and the water so much you almost cannot bear it, that is the door. If you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is a door. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. This is Jean-Paul Sartre. Man is condemned to be free because once thrown into the world, He is responsible for everything he does. It is up to you to give life meaning. And last, culminating, Joan Didion, Book of Common Prayer. You have to pick the places you don't walk away from. You have to pick the places you don't walk away from. So now you have a litany of miraculous powers you were born with. This talk really, you are a Siddha. That is the point of this talk. That is this exercise. That is the point of this exercise. You are the Siddha. You didn't need an initiation to gain access. You have birthright citizenship in Siddhahood. It's in the Constitution. You didn't need to practice for decades to somehow attain these 8 CDs. They are yours. They are you. They are utterly holy. They are directly accessible to you here and now, one way or another. In part one, Shadow, we shared the truth that we are creatures of both light and darkness, that both are vital, each rich in its own medicine. Together they constitute our mystical and psychological ecosystem. We also shared the truth that evil is neither of the light or of the darkness, although it often presents itself or is identified as one or the other. It is rather anti-life. It has no color. It is evidence of a soullessness, someone who has fallen into the abyss. In part two, Siddha, we have shared some of the truth of our primal reality, specifically 8 miraculous powers, siddhas, which are elemental, integral to us individually and as a species. Touch, laughter, sleep, conscience, voice, creativity, sexuality, and free will. There are other gifts that have been given, other supplies we have provisioned with. Arguably, both empathy and intuition could have been included in this litany, although those two are more problematical, and we'll get into that. And what is love itself? Well, you'll hear much more about these, about empathy, intuition, and love in part three and part four of these talks. As I said in the beginning, life affirming, celebratory, empowering. I hope that is the experience from this series. This is a time of great trial and tribulation in our country and on our planet. The affirmation of life, the celebration of life and this world, and the empowerment of each of us, individually and collectively, is sorely needed. Oh, CD, Amoga CD, shine bright, green light, Buddha of all accomplishing wisdom. Amoga CD, Amoga CD, Om Ah Ho. May the Vajra of the heart be realized in this lifetime. Shaboom. This video, along with the full text of this talk, with the slides, each of the slides will be available on my Substack. The video will be available both on the Theosophical Society YouTube platform and on Words of Power, my YouTube platform. And the text and the slides as well. An embedded video will be available on my Substack. Thank you.